Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above, So Below Radio. I'm your host, Martin Hodgson, and it gives me great pleasure to have you tuning in today. When you get a chance, please visit the website holisticadvocate.com. For any updates on news as well as interviews, please visit my blog. Also, take a moment to subscribe and become a member. Not only will you gain access to the commercial-free subscriber-based interviews, but also treat yourself to an assortment of fascinating people worth listening to. Today's guests are Michael Elan and Laura Legere. Michael is an author, a channeler, as well as a lecturer. Having become fully aware since 1981, he has thus far been profiled on a multitude of newspapers, radio programs, as well as on television. Considered a direct voice channel for key members of the spiritual hierarchy, Michael helps bring clarity and understanding to anyone seeking their life's purpose. Laura is a holistic practitioner, a massage therapist, as well as a teacher, specializing in the holistic treatment of using and applying therapeutic grade essential oils for emotional release, detoxification, and nutrition since 1996. Laura's mission is to help people realign their lives. Join me in welcoming Michael and Laura as they discuss stories, headlines, and breaking news. First of all, I want to give both of you a warm welcome for being on As Above, So Below Radio. This is a different format in that I have two guests here. Typically, I have one guest, but for any of our listeners out there, I want to point out that Michael is a channeler and Laura is a massage therapist. More information on their background can be found when you pull up the video archives on my website, holisticadvocate.com. Okay, now, Michael, you have a website called michaellegion.com, is that correct?
Yes, Michael Elejan, my first and last name, Michael, Michael, Ellegion.com.
All right. Now, you've also co-written a book called Prepare for the Landings, is that correct?
Yes.
Would you mind just quickly giving a synopsis in regards to your book?
Well, the book, the way I like to explain it is in regard the difference between the book and my 90-minute transformational channel readings is that the book gives you an overview of what the higher forces, the Galactic Federation, the Galactics are going to be doing here shortly, and what they've been doing, what they're about to do, while my 90-minute individual channel, transformational channel readings give a person an individual sense of how you fit into the grand scheme of things. So the book does prepare everybody, hence the title, Prepare for the Landings. But there has been a slight shift as far as the circumstances of the ships coming down from not longer being an evacuation to being more of a open first contact scenario.
Interesting. Okay. And Laura, you have a website called lauralegere.com, right?
Well, I have yes, lauralegere.com, L-A-U-R-A, Legere, Legere.com, but also I have my book website, it's not weirdanymore.com. I have those two, and then I have my massage website too.
Oh, okay, great. Now, would you care to just give a brief synopsis regarding your book? That's an unusual title. It's not weird anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to make a lot of times we use weird to kind of blow off things that happen in our lives. We use it for a lot of different reasons. And so I wrote the book. I started it in 2007 because I had a major life-threatening accident in Mexico, and on a scooter, and they had to put 7 steel plates and 34 screws in my face in Mexico. And because I am a healer and I use Young Living essential oils, my friend that was with me, we just poured the oil. We just kept putting the oils on my face, and I never had a headache. I never had any pain whatsoever. The oil shrunk the swelling by 80% in 2 days, and I'm taking people on my really synchronistic journey, which starts out with me almost dying in Mexico, but then it led to all these things where it ended up being a very spiritual planned event. And it's entertaining, it's not depressing. And I'm taking people on my healing journey as well as taking them on a spiritual adventure journey.
Interesting. So the book basically it deals with synchronistic events, right?
Yes, and also how you choose to think about your choices and your circumstances can make them worse or better.
Interesting. You know what's synchronistic here is that before this interview, I was hearing the Carpenters, and I was hearing calling occupants of interplanetary craft. So talk about synchronicity here, huh?
Wow.
Interesting. I first heard that song back in the late 70s. I'm trying to remember who did that.
That was Karen Carpenter and her
Oh,
brother.
that's right. Yeah, Karen Carpenter.
Yeah, and I was preparing. Actually, I was wrapping up the questions here, and I went to YouTube just to, listen to some calming music, and all of a sudden I came here with let's see, the Carpenters, and lo and behold, they were playing "Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft." I'm like, huh, okay, maybe there's a message here. Who knows?
There's always a message.
Always, yeah, absolutely. Now, Laura, when you talked about the oils, you were referring to the oils that you distribute, right?
Yeah, I teach people. I teach people how to use them, and I use them on my clients. So I've worked on a lot of people that have had some really severe issues like MS. I do a treatment called raindrop therapy, and I had a client early on when I was using the oils in the mid 90s, and she had it diagnosed on the brain. She couldn't remember what she was doing from 1 minute to the next. I watched her body heat up, get red, and then she'd have muscle spasms and pain. And we did this treatment for once a week for 2.5 years, and all her symptoms went away. And that was the first thing. But they literally saved my life when I was in Mexico. And I've worked on a lot of people that have had real severe degenerative spinal problems, and they really actually helped repair the nerve, muscle, bone, and ligaments, and cleaned off the receptor sites that go through the central nervous system.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So let's now talk about a recent topic on everyone's mind, I'm sure. I want to first talk about the downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17. I'd like to first extend my condolences to all the family members here on this tragedy. Now, what's weird about this flight, according to Rents.com, a top pro-Russian rebel commander has given an account stating that many of the victims may have died days before the plane took off. Now, he stated that a significant number of the bodies weren't fresh at the crash site, and they were drained of blood and reeked of composition. What's your perspective on this?
Well, first of all, and this is also based on video footage and any normal crash. Video footage, there was no video footage of the plane actually coming down. And that's very strange. Usually when it get hit by a missile, the kind of missile that supposedly hit it, there would be this huge, smoke trail of it coming out of the sky. You'd see debris coming down. None of it. All of a sudden, you see an explosion coming up from the ground. That's a little odd, first of all. And considering everything the officials have done from 9/11 on, we see huge amount of manipulation of information. CNN comes out. Later on, people used to work for CNN with footage showing how during the Iraq War, they were actually broadcasting from studios during that war when they were supposed to pretending to be from the fight from Iraq itself. And I'm just bringing up a few situations that they're suspect the details and the circumstance surrounding the, quote, crash doesn't coincide, first of all, with a normal crash. and these bodies appeared to have been decomposed for quite some time. So there seems to be definitely a lot of conflicting information. That having been said, and I think we're still waiting to get all the details on it, I think I've heard from my sources from the Galactics that there have been many, many, quote, air crashes where the officials don't want to admit to us, but they have never either found bodies on board or there was strange circumstance surrounding the plane coming down. This has happened a number of times. They've not officially told us. They have discovered this, and they don't want to let us know. Now, Flight 370, Ashtar told me, one of the beings I communicate with, right when it happened, right afterwards, that they had taken the plane because some of the people who were on that plane happened to be working at one of the companies that Rothschild owns, and there was this whole thing about him wanting to gain control over that company, and it appeared that they were trying to down that plane using some kind of particle beam weapon. So the Galactics took the plane and them away out of the third dimension, and they ended up, there's several different versions of where they actually ended up. It's my understanding that the Galactics did take them aboard a ship, and then they ended up actually in a number of places. In the Hollow Earth, they were on the planet Venus, they were in another dimension. They kind of moved around, but they're not on the third dimension planet Earth anymore, and that they're going to come back one day. Like many other earlier, quote, mysteries, whether it be Flight 19 that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, they're going to come back not having aged. So and people from 9/11 who supposedly died, they're going to come back also. They were beamed up out of that building. So there's just a lot of circumstances around Flight 370 that definitely, whether it was divine intervention. This recent one, I think there was intervention in some way too. I don't know all the details, but it appears that, again, what we're seeing is the cabal attempting to manipulate us by trying to create wars and stuff against what the people's will is. And this is what they're trying to do, blame things on Russia. Russia was not in on that. And they also had a theory that Putin's plane they tried to down, and they supposedly shot that plane down instead. Well, Putin is not stupid enough he knows very well about the situation. The cabal is just desperately trying to find something they can blame Russia for and also manipulate things behind the scenes.
So the other thing that happened with 17 is that they found piles of fresh passports and airline tickets that they just looked brand spanking new, newer than you would have in your pocket.
Right.
And they also said, well, we went to a bookstore a couple nights ago, and they had two newspapers. The Seattle Times said, "No, the rebels are keeping any investigators from the crash site." Then the right next to the Seattle Times was the New York Times, and the main picture on the front was, here's a picture of a dead body at the scene, and it was in grass, and it was a full body that wasn't charred and had a little bit of plastic over it. So it's like, okay, so if they're not letting any investigators in, they're letting photographers in? That doesn't even make any sense. It was totally plain as day to us right there. And also the Washington Post, the thing is the mainstream media is so mad at all these bloggers that are really sophisticated, and they pick apart the false flags right away. So they're mad because they can't pull the wool over anybody's eyes anymore. So they're going after some of the bloggers and trying to make a blogger who's really intelligent and has really good deductive reasoning that they're a nutcase. But then if you look at the comments under the article, they're all defending that blogger. So it's really falling apart. They've been trying to start World War III for years and years, and no matter what they do, they get caught.
I think this is my perspective that World War III already began with Fukushima. I think you're just trying to escalate the whole situation here. But what's even more weird is that the Malaysian crash shared the same anniversary with TWA Flight 800.
That's an interesting story. When I was living in Florida, and I had a computer consultant come over to my place who had been at the location where Flight 800 was shot out of the sky by a missile, which they later tried to, deny. he happened to be turning on the local news, and somebody had just got this new camera at his party, and he points it at the sky, and all of a sudden you see Flight 800, and you see the missile come up. He goes, "What's that?" And the missile hits the plane, it blows apart. Well, they showed it in the local news that day, but the next day, suddenly the film didn't exist anymore. Went down the memory sink, as we call it. Yeah, but he saw it. It was confirmed, and they, to this day, tried to deny that they actually did it. It was either because there was somebody on that plane. You know, the CIA's been willing to take a whole plane down because somebody on it they want to got rid of. Then there's a theory it was accidental. I don't think there's any accidents, but still, they covered it up, and the fact that they did down it with a missile.
Yeah, even John Leer stated in effect, he has key connections. He stated in effect that a U.S. Navy ship accidentally shot down the TWA Flight 800 with an unarmed practice missile.
Yeah, well, it was definitely a missile. The question is, was it accidental or was it purposely done? Or they could say it was accidental when they really intended it. I don't know about that. I just know a missile was used.
Well, I heard there was a bunch of either some kind of bonds and paperwork that were on that plane. I can't remember. I remember reading something about that, and I can't remember what it was. But they also do all this stuff to destroy a lot of records too.
Oh yeah.
That's why they blew up the Oklahoma City building. The what was the name of that building?
Well, federal building in
What was it?
Oklahoma.
Right, the federal
whatever the
building.
name of it. Yeah, there was documents in there. Of course, the BATF was on in the building that day when the whole thing happened. They got warned ahead of time, and there's plenty of evidence there were explosives in that building. But there was documents and records that also connected Hillary and a number of corrupt politicians with events that happened. Also, that during the Gulf War, all of these soldiers were injected with an experimental AIDS virus. And that's what caused the Gulf storm, the Gulf, syndrome afterwards. That disease that they all had, and that with all this information, they wanted to get rid of and destroy.
Yeah, that was the Alfred Mura building,
Yeah,
right?
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's switch topics here. Pretty much in the same theme, however. The current crisis between Russia and the Ukraine. Um, are the pangs for another war in the horizon? I mean, it's a sure bet that Kerry is pushing for a conflict with Russia. What's your opinion on Russia taking the stance to defeat once and for all the Zionists, as Edgar Casey's prediction once hinted, that Russia would be the hope of the world?
Well, to me, Putin is really a good guy, and he and 100 and almost 180 countries have all become part of what's called the new BRIG, a new economic system that's outside the Federal Reserve System. This is where the BRIC system, and they're effectively pulling away for the first time historically, joining together and forcing the Federal Reserve system to go down, basically, by doing this. And that's why they're trying to malign Putin and blame everything on the Russians when it's CIA and all these and Mossad and all these intelligence agencies working together to keep the cabal in place. But it's breaking apart. It's coming apart. This whole cover-up is being exposed.
So we sent our CIA sent over the Greystone mercenaries, a lot of them, over to the Ukraine to cause havoc, to shoot police and protesters and everybody so they could get this bloodbath going, and people videotaped it. Even the police found CIA agents within the protesters, and they actually videotaped the CIA agent and put it on YouTube and showed his identity and everything, so people would understand what was going on, what was being played here. And the other thing is that a whole bunch of Greystone mercenaries ended up just totally disappearing and missing. And the CIA went over there to find out what happened to them. And my take on it is they either got beamed out of there. Some of them got. It depends on, what kind of soul contract somebody has. So to me, some of them got beamed out of there. Some of them got captured and some of them got killed. That's what I think happened to them, but it was like a whole bunch of them just got taken out.
Well, okay, now I have to ask you this. There are some people who are listening or will listen to this broadcast, and when they hear the term beamed up, they're going to probably roll their eyes and say, "Oh, brother," but divine intervention, or in this case, galactic intervention, is in fact a reality according to both of you, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, anything that would result in, quote, nuclear war, as far as, just a full-scale thermonuclear war will not be allowed. That's what the cabal's trying to instigate is nuclear war. So the events going on in Ukraine and they're trying to instigate this. So when things that the cabal's doing, and like with the black, the Greystone and Blackstone, all these groups that are working for the cabal are planning to do something that's going to cause a massive amount of death, the Galactics have authority at this point to step in. And you see, those of us who are volunteers in Earth Embodiment, and I invite people to go to my website, michaelelejean.com, and take a look at the NASA Star People characteristic list and see how many of those characteristics you end up that you have. That's an indication that you are a volunteer in Earth Embodiment that's come on a mission here. And those are the ones I do my 90-minute transformational channel readings for. But the point is that they have intervened so many times after the false flag of 9/11. There was at least 70 events bigger than 9/11 that the cabal was planning that would have wiped out everyone but 500 million people on the planet by now if they had had their way. The Galactic stepped in. They allowed 9/11 because that was a wake-up call, as well as beaming most people out of the building. And it was a wake-up call, woke everybody up. And now the only thing that the cabal is capable of really doing and getting away with, so-called, are all these so-called smaller false flags where, these 74 shootings that have been taking place around the country, half of those never actually happened, were made up, or the ones that did, as based on the blogs of videos and all the investigators, shows how these were all, contrived. They're using crisis actors. They even put ads in the Atlanta and Chicago newspaper asking for crisis actors. They're willing to pay them $100 to $200, but they had to sign non-disclosure forms. In other words, from the Aurora Theater shooting or the Sandy Hook, which was a big hoax. When you investigate what really happened, nothing happened they officially claim. Parents claiming to lose children, there's no tears coming out of their eyes. They're bad B actors. They're not even Academy Award-winning actors. So all these things are being contrived in an attempt to create emotional response. But people are waking up, not responding like the cabal is attempting to do.
So I'm going to give you an example of something that happened up here.
Mm-hmm.
First, I want to clarify the 74 shootings. He means 74. They've said there's 74 school shootings in the last year, not just shootings, but that. And so we had this incident up here where a guy was on I-5, Interstate 5, on the bridge that goes over one of the lakes. It's called the Ship Canal Bridge. He stops his truck in the middle. This happened about 6 weeks ago. He stops his truck in the middle of the freeway. It's on fire. He gets a can of green paint and paints a circle in the middle of the freeway and then tries to spray paint the cars as they go by. Well, and they shut the freeway down for 6 hours. And this is my take on it. Because there's whistleblowers that are explaining about the mind control and like the HARP and the Gwyn towers, not just the weather, but it's actually beaming messages and putting voices in people's heads and programming them. And probably the people that have, this is a generalization, but maybe the people that have are less conscious are more vulnerable to this kind of technology, and they're more programmable. So I was talking to Michael, and I was having him channel my other half from the ship, and I asked him, I said, so was that paint can really planning? It was supposed to be a gun, and maybe instead the Galactics are messing with everything and screwing up the programs, and they just look like some crazy event. Now, the cops did come, and they tried to taser him, and their taser didn't work. Now, I thought that was interesting, too. But they shot him, but at the time, it doesn't sound like they killed him. He ended up in the hospital, but I don't know what's happened to him since. But that sounds like you know, oh, and his car and his truck just burn up. And so what he was channeling is that that actually the truck probably had like a bomb to blow up that bridge. And so all of these things that, there's so many things that they have planned that have not worked out at all. I mean, there was probably, hundreds of 9/11s that they planned since 9/11 that never managed. And so now um, these little planned events that are, that are all staged aren't really panning out at all. And that one that I just described to you was just a nutty thing. I mean, just completely nuts.
Right. Now that we're talking about this topic, there have been many cases where local police have gone berserk and have shot people. There was just one case in New Mexico, I believe. There was this homeless person who was surrounded by a gang of law enforcement officials, and it was videotaped. The homeless person was, as far as I can tell, he wasn't attacking the police officers, and they just killed him. There were several rounds pumped into his body, and this is sadly a growing trend all over the country. What's your perspective on this?
Well, I think that that's the programming because I actually saw a video clip or a YouTube clip of this cop that came to a person's house and told him he was under arrest, and he pushed him onto the couch, and his son was filming the whole thing. And the guy is like, "What am I arrested for? Why are you doing this?" And the cop's on top of him on the couch trying to handcuff him. And then he's going to go for his gun. And the guy that was, he was doing this to is going, "You do not shoot me. Do not shoot me." And the cop looked so confused. He didn't know what to say to the guy. And he didn't even know where to put his hands. And he was having a struggle. He couldn't even handcuff the guy. And he looked like he was, to me, in the video, it looked like he was short-circuiting, like something was really wrong with him. So I think they're programming the cops. They're sending these beams to the cops. Plus, they're giving the cops, all this military equipment. They're giving them tanks and, crazy outfits. I mean, these, basically looks like, they're fighting a war. And part of it is I think they're gung-ho people who just want to play with the equipment. So they're making up this stuff in their head that isn't even happening. And they're going into the wrong people's houses, and they're going in as a SWAT team, which isn't even necessary, even if they had the right house. And they are causing all these problems. They're killing people that have, epilepsy and Asperger's and autism, and they even beat up a guy, a poor kid that had Down syndrome. And they're killing people's pets, and nothing was going on.
It's like if you have problems, the last person you want to call is the police. I mean, the way they're programmed. And the thing that I'm optimistic about, despite Laura and I like to call ourselves conspiracy optimists, okay, which is kind of a play on words because the fact that despite all this going on, and with the police acting out, we see all this stuff going around the planet. The cabal is attempting to instigate a lot of things, they plan martial law and all kinds of things that they're not going to be able to do. But one of the things that Laura and I are very excited about is the common law grand juries that are process being formed right now. And so when we see instances of police or corrupt judges or anybody who's not upholding their oath, and the common law grand juries, which are going to start becoming officially very soon, have the authority to really overturn a lot of the corruption. We'll be able to arrest judges and people who not uphold their oath of office, and also throw out any laws that are not aligned with the original organic constitution. We're going to turn this around and create accountability and stop all this craziness that's been going on, as well as all the corruption that the cabal has been getting away with. And one of the people I'm very inspired by is Kevin Arnett in the International Common Law Court, that literally they have the authority now to arrest the popes, the queen, the president of Canada, and the corrupt, all these corrupt priests and everyone that's been getting away with literally murder. So there's a turnaround occurring, even though we're watching other things happen that is going to be, are going to help, are going to be dealt with once the common law grand jury is finally set in motion.
All right, the gun confiscation issue. It's no big surprise or secret that politicians do want to take away the guns, registered guns, from people. Matter of fact, there was a drive just recently in Los Angeles. Um, what's your take on this? Is it going to get any worse?
Well, what's happening is the more they do these false flags, the more guns get sold. So it's backfiring like crazy. And it is, they cannot declare martial law until they de-arm the citizens, and they can't. They've totally failed in that.
See, to me, any of us who are, working for peace on the planet, I've always had a very strong awareness, though, that those of us who are termed rainbow warriors of peace, that under the Second Amendment, we do have a right to protect ourselves. Now, in all this legislation, under the disguise of making the world a peaceful place, this is just common sense. Look at history. Every time they disarmed the population, okay, they brought in a fascist dictatorship, communism, fascism, whatever. They disarmed the people before they did that. And all of the laws they've been attempting to pass, from the Bundy laws on, were all part of an agenda. Now, I believe very strongly, I know we're going into a new consciousness where eventually weapons won't work anyway, okay, in this new consciousness. But you can't legislate peace when people don't feel safe. When people feel safe, they'll put away their guns. There won't be any need to pass laws, but all the laws that are being passed and all these 74 shootings are designed to try to make people emotionally, oh yeah, I'll give up my guns for peace. Well, the criminals will still have guns. That's the point of the whole thing. They want to create lawlessness and chaos, but people are too hep now and realize what's going on, and what's really the agenda. And a lot of these really altruistic, well-meaning people, unfortunately, who say, let's just get rid of all the guns, they don't really look at it logically. I want to see a world of peace, but you can't legislate it. It will happen when the time is right. We're merging into that, and weapons won't work eventually. But any type of legislation is part of an agenda. And all these shootings, it appears that they always get back to the point of, this is not one more time will this be allowed. These people that are part of the false lease crisis actors always say the same thing, basically. They always refer to the guns. We've got to get rid of them. This is the whole agenda, is to disarm the country, but not be accountable for their actions of what they're a part of, and the real agenda that's going on in all of this.
So the more recent one, which was the supposed girl that got her whole family was shot, and she got shot in the back of the head, and within a day or two, she's up on the media, telling everybody we've got to change all this stuff, and she looks actually quite good, and if she tries to cry, there isn't any tears. And at the funeral, she does that satanic hand wave out the window and is smiling to everybody at her whole family's supposed funeral.
Now, this is who now?
It was the more recent thing that happened. Where was that? There's so many now. I can't. They get jumbled up in my mind, but it's the most recent thing that they put in the media, and they blamed it on the guy that was supposed to be the ex-husband of the sister, daughter, or whatever, or her sister, and he was looking for her, his ex, and they wouldn't show him where. That's the story they gave, and they wouldn't cooperate with him, so he shot the whole family, and she pretended like she was dead. And it was totally fake.
Well, also go back to Sandy Hook, which there's plenty of evidence to say that school wasn't even in operation when this supposedly happened. In a normal emergency, real live, event, not a make-believe situation, there's bodies showing up at hospitals, emergency wards. The parents afterwards have major lawsuits. None of that happened. In fact, they were all given new homes after this happened. All the people there in Sandy Hook. there's huge number of contradictions in all of these events, like Sandy Hook. And two of the people supposedly died in Sandy Hook were alive at the Boston Marathon. One of them was supposed to be a teacher or principal. He's running in the marathon.
She is.
She is. So, and you see some of the same actors at all of these events. The videos have pointed out and documented this.
Wow. Okay. Well, it gets confusing every day. All right, let's transition here. We've briefly touched upon Malaysian Flight 370. Some say the plane went down, others indicate that it veered off course to Diego Garcia. Still, others claim that the plane had been taken by a UFO. What's your perspective on what may have happened?
Well, I actually saw the radar of what was at the air traffic controllers because somebody put that online, and you can see little planes. You can see little planes which represent the planes in the air, and you see this one plane fly so fast past all the other planes on the radar, and then you see it turn into a disc, and it gets really close to where it shows you the route of the Malaysian plane, and you see the Malaysian plane start to veer like severely one way and then the other, and then it just disappears right on the radar. I saw that.
Yeah, so it definitely was taken by the Galactics, because I said this earlier. My sources told me about it, and then other channel sources also verify about that. There's a little variation about exactly where it was taken, but the fact most agree that it was an extraterrestrial intervention because of what I said earlier. Rothschild wanted to control that, get rid of everybody connected with the company, own all the stock, but also they were using a particle beam, they were planning to use a particle beam on that plane. So the Galactics took them away, and then plan them eventually bring them back to document all this and also expose a lot of other things going on.
So this one whistleblower was explaining about the mind control too, that they can beam the tower at a plane and make the pilots and the crew docile or totally zombied out, and just make them do whatever, and then they can commandeer the plane and do whatever they want with it. And we know now since 2008, they have that technology for our cars too.
Right.
So this recent Malaysian one, the one that just crashed, all of the radio control tower people that were from other countries, they removed them out of there and replaced them with others that would go along with the official agenda. In other words, remove anybody who knew the real facts and just present the version they wanted to tell everybody.
But let me ask you this. What would be the motive in doing this? What are they trying to hide?
Well, again, the incident, I see it as however way they were planning to do it, because sometimes the cabal might change their plans, but the plan to me was to use this to instigate an international incident, blame it on Russia, and as an excuse because they're angry with Putin, breaking away from the Federal Reserve. Now it's interesting, also Germany and France are getting pretty peeved, and now they're about to break away from the Federal Reserve NATO alliance also.
They already did.
Yeah. So there's not hardly any members left except the U.S. and Canada, or Britain, and one or two others. So this was an incident to instigate. They, as so often their plans don't go according to plan because people are waking up and not, certain people are refusing to go along with it or whistleblowing, as far as the real facts involved in it.
So they were trying to start, that incident was to try to start World War III like they keep trying to do. Now, the other thing I was reading, that Ariel Sharon, the president of Israel, Sweden would not allow him to fly over their airspace. They made his plane go around their country, and according to the BRICS meeting that they had in Brazil, July 15th, which was all 188 countries deciding to corner the cabal and not play with them anymore and stop all their stuff. These public officials that we have in our country that are playing that stupid game, they're not allowed to to land in any of those countries.
Or they'll be arrested.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the chaotic mess in Gaza. The mainstream media doesn't seem interested in sharing details on the death toll. So, without being disrespectful here, what's your perspective on this conflict? Is this just another skirmish, or could it possibly lead to something worse?
Well, it's a horrible thing that people are physically being killed. I mean, I look at the historical situation of so many times in the past. The cabal, every country on the planet has been affected by the cabal, some worse than others. And there's I don't want to stereotype anybody in any way because there's an awful lot of Jewish people that are really opposed as much as they try to make it sound like they're all against the Palestinians. There's a lot of people that are not going along with whether it be the CIA right-wing element here in the U.S. that wants war, or the Mossad right-wing element in Israel, the Zionist group that wants to keep the war machine. And basically, from racial sense, there's a huge amount of hatred. Of course, it's been going on, that's been perpetrated and emphasized to keep the cash cow war machine going. And to me, there's a lot of karma involved in this. There's goes back, an eye for an eye, goes back for generations of people hating one another, and it's time that has to come to an end. But to me, I feel that Israel, yes, though, so Hamas sent a few man-made, real old rockets that hasn't injured anybody. But to me, Israel primarily is involved in human genocide right now. And it was interesting that tapes were released. The three teenagers that were supposed to kill by Palestinians, those officials were speaking Hebrew against the teenagers. In other words, that was to me Mossad willing to kill their own. I mean, the CIA killed their own citizens here. What would be the difference there? They instigate a war that they could have an excuse just to decimate people. And the ones who are fanatical, there's a huge number of people over there opposed to it too. So I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff they're not talking about, and it's the same old cash cow war machine. The U.S., Israel, who is ever making profit off the war. That seems to be their agenda. They don't care how many they kill, and they use their own people sometimes for that purpose.
Well, I think that they're doing the same thing. I mean, with Palestine, as they're doing with the Ukraine, and that they tried in Syria, and they tried all these other things. They're just doing whatever they think they can, because it's basically, to me, the only countries that are left is Israel and the United States, and that's it. They're in on any of that.
Right. Okay. Well, let me talk about another topic here. Rumors have it that people are leaving Fukushima in droves. Now, I got this info from a channeled reading given by Barbara Marciniak. Um, she, in effect, stated that they are settling in Kamchatka. Uh, do the higher galactics have a perspective on this? I mean, is this what's eventually going to happen? We know that the radiation from Fukushima is going to have a great impact on a global basis.
Well, my sources are saying, then there's some other sources saying the same thing, that even though there was this huge amount of radiation released at the time, the galactic stepped in and have neutralized most of the effects. I mean, if it really was as bad, the West Coast here, we would all been radiated horribly. A lot of people would be dying. Based on the data that they had, based on the way they scientifically and a third dimensional viewed, but other people who have experts with Geiger counters who are using special equipment, they don't detect any radiation coming, that supposedly was being released from Fukushima from the distance it was claiming. I'm not saying that around the nuclear plants there isn't some rays of radiation, but the way that that was being described doesn't seem to correspond with a lot of other data too. There's a lot of conflicting information, it seems, in some of what's happening, because there's different agendas being played out by various people involved directly or indirectly with that, nuclear reactor, and what the political implications are and everything else. So I hear a lot of conflicting stories. My sources keep saying they're doing all they can to keep the radiation at check. And again, there are some questions about around the nuclear reactor. It may be somewhat high, but my perception is it's not the degree as it's made out to be at some levels. So I don't know. All I can say is there's a lot of conflicting accounts about that.
If there was no intervention, we would be skeletons. You wouldn't be talking
Yeah,
to us right now.
you're on the West Coast.
Okay. Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What do you say to people with evidence showing starfish literally oozing and melting on seashores, sea lions losing their fur? Um, let's see, I remember reading a story where I think 14 out of 14 tuna fish were exposed to heavy radiation. Um, and I'm sure there are other stories, other accounts of infected or radiated uh, sea mammals or sea animals from the ocean. What's your perspective here? What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, okay, there's so many fake stories, and they write all kinds of articles. So unless I was actually there and saw it myself, because they also insert a lot of, they Photoshop a lot of things. And part of this whole thing about being afraid of this whole thing at Fukushima is feeding into the fear, and that's what the cabal wants. For one, is that they take opportunities to run with stories to create more fear, too. And so I just don't know if I'm reading a story like that whether it's really real. I did listen to a guy who was a very professional person who was explaining to people. He has all this really heavy equipment to measure all kinds of stuff, and he was educating us on different kinds of radiation. And he said the kinds of radiation that they were reading isn't the one that's detrimental. And so, and he said he sells Geiger counters, but he said he was telling people not to buy them because it wasn't going to read the kind of radiation that he was talking about, and he didn't think it was even worth it to buy one for that. So it was interesting what he had to say, and of course, a lot of people are, everybody's, it's a heartfelt, intense subject too, and so I just feel like it's kind of being used as well. But I have to say, I feel like personally, I would feel it really intense in my body, or I would just be dust if there wasn't any kind of neutralization going on.
I want to mention something. Back in 1985, when the Chernobyl reactor in Russia went off, and there was a real horrendous thing about to happen because of that. Now, when my sources told me that Astra told me they brought a ship down over the reactor and neutralized a huge amount of that radiation. Even though there was evidence of contamination in parts of Europe because of it, it would have been considerably higher. Excuse me. And I was told about this. A light ship coming down over the reactor. Well, interesting, years later, when the Berlin Wall fell and all this former classified documents that the KGB released, some of it was UFO material. And one of the documents described, confirming what I had been told, that when the cleanup crew that was ordered at gunpoint basically go in and clean up the mess, and they didn't want to go in there because they knew, what was going to happen. Well, because they assumed it was all going to be as contaminated, and they were going to be affected. Well, as they're approaching a reactor, all of a sudden, they see a UFO come down. In the document, it describes the UFO coming down, hovering over the reactor, and they watched the rad level start to drop very considerably from where it had been. And so it's just interesting. I get these confirmations. So they've been telling me in fact, the 3 Mile Island incident, prior to that would have been a China syndrome. And there was information. There used to be a publication called Official UFO. And before I read that article, I was told, Astor told me that they intervened in that. Well, sure enough, in this article later, a ufologist was talking about information he had gotten a hold of, and their contact he was talking to who had also received information that they stepped in and intervened, or it would have been major China syndrome, much, much worse than how it turned out at that time. So there's been all these instances of intervening. So for them to imply now that they're not going to be stepping in to help out, I mean, I remember when I heard about the Fukushima, when I first heard about it, immediately I'm picking up ships were coming down, to intervene. And sure enough, a few days later, videos appeared briefly on the internet where they were videotaping UFOs hovering overhead, which definitely means they were intervening. But of course, the media blacked that all out and ignored it, while they emphasize and keep it as a major disaster to get a lot of play out of it. So to say whether there was no effect on any life at all, I don't know that. I just know the level that it should have been was not that level. I also remember back when I was very young in elementary school, after Ashtar had started appearing to me, connecting with me as I share when he first kind of popped into my life when I was 9 years of age, watching President Kennedy's news conference on the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in that old black and white TV I used to watch. And Ashtar pops in the room, the higher being I communicate with, and he's standing there etheric, but he looked, as I often say, more real than some of the mundane humans they saw walking around. And his first words to me telepathically were, he says, "We're not going to allow nuclear war. It's against Federation policy." And then he started to tell me how they were coming down over military bases and shutting down all the missiles. Now, years later, all these retired guys and disclosure, I've talked about when they were much younger, at various military bases, watching the UFOs come down and shut down their missiles. I get all these confirmation years later. And they showed us when we were going to school these anti-drug films that were showing fetuses that were mutilated because supposedly from drugs. Well, my sources tell me, no, that was actually the amount of radiation that was because of the nuclear testing going on in the 50s and so on. There was a huge amount of nuclear radiation. And there were massive green fireballs appearing in the sky. I was told this was Galactic Federation ships who specifically were taking radiation out of the sky. But there was still an effect on many fetuses. And I'm told that those were actually radiation mutations, not drug side effects. And they showed these films using them as anti-drug propaganda films. I'm just saying how they distort information and use something for something else, as an example, take it out of context or put a spin on it and use it as a propaganda thing.
Okay. All right, let's switch topics here. I want to talk about the U.S. economy. Are we soon to see the crash of the U.S. dollar? And if so, would it be a blessing in disguise? I read an article that talked about Chinese investors buying up U.S. property in this country. Matter of fact, China bought $22 billion worth of U.S. homes in the past year. Your take on this?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, what we're getting is that China is actually our ally and is trying to help us. They've been actually trying to keep the U.S. dollar from. They don't want. It's not in the world's benefit for the U.S. to completely crash. It's like what I've been getting from different sources is that they're actually trying to cushion the fall. I mean, because basically, the U.S. dollars is fiat currency. There is nothing. It's air, and
Oh, I know.
and that's what's going on with the other countries is they're refusing the U.S. dollar, and they're getting they're actually the new banking system that's in place, ready to be launched, is get backed by precious metals and resources, and it does have teeth to it. And so that's interesting that China did that, because basically our system, our U.S. system, corrupt banksters and everything are the ones that stole the property in the first place from everybody. So I don't get that what China just did is a bad thing at all.
In fact, there were some sources that said that what is called the White Dragon Society, which is one of the major spiritual groups, bought the Federal Reserve basically, but have let it stay in place temporarily. And very soon, the Federal Reserve is going to be moved out of the way. The IRS is going to go away. There's some things happening right now behind the scenes, which related to what Ashtar told me years ago about this cosmic sting operation that they had ongoing. It would take a number of years. And so there's a lot of people waiting right now for the global currency reset and the RV to happen. Well, before it can happen, they want to make sure that not one member of the cabal, who also double dipped just recently when they were doing some currency exchanges and have done some illegal things, which has been there's a sting operation going on to gather evidence against all these people who are just trying to amass it all for themselves. And when all of them have been arrested or moved out of the way because of what Kevin Arnett and all these people are doing to expose and document and arrest these people, once they're moved out of the way, then the global reset will occur. They just want to make sure nobody makes profit off of humanity's suffering. It's kind of like insult and type of injury. People have been insulted and injured enough by the cabal without having to continue in a system that's still corrupt. So, according to what I understand, in order to, when the event occurs, they do have to shut the banking system down for a few days at the most and reboot it back up so the cabal will no longer have any control and they can't get into your bank account and put a lien on, like the IRS putting a lien or a notice of a lien and claiming they have authority when they don't. We got to get that. That's part of the cabal. Get that out of the way, alter the system, and then the new system's going to come into effect.
So the common law grand jury is perfect for this, and we haven't really explained that a whole lot. Can I go into that a little bit?
Would you mind waiting that for the second hour here?
Oh, no, I don't mind that. No.
Okay, great. Now, we are approaching the end of the first hour, so would both of you care to remind our listeners of your websites and how they can purchase your books?
Yeah, they can purchase my book on itsnotweirdanymore.com, because that's the name of the book. And, I have it on LauraLegere.com, too. And then, Michael, what about yours?
Well, my book, Prepare for the Landings, the best thing is actually go to Amazon, and there's a link there. What my website really emphasizes is also my 90-minute personal transformational channel readings for the light workers, star people. Go out and take a look at that NASA star people list and see how many of those characteristics you have. And I do readings for people to help tune them into their mission and purpose. And more than just the conscious information, they have an energy beam on me when I'm doing these sessions from a light ship on a higher dimension, and they're downloading what is called these higher light encodements, which is part of the Elohim consciousness technology. So more than just having the session, when you replay back the recording many, many times, this activates your DNA RNA and causes a whole transformation, as well as insight on your mission.
And his website is michaelelegion.com. Elegion, ELLEGION.com, and the link for to buy his book on Amazon is on his website too.
Interesting. Now, Michael, you have an event that you'll be participating in September at Mount Shasta. Would you care to just briefly talk about that?
Yes, on September 12th, 13th, and 14th, Laura and I both are going to be up at Mount Shasta, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on how one of the things I'm going to talk about, one of the topics is about how the common law grand juries are going to form into an Earth Planetary Council that will then be connected with the Galactic Council. And the people are now rising up to become, self-empowered and self-represented, and getting the cabal and the corrupt government out of the way. The Galactics are overshadowing this and helping us in this process. So I'll be discussing all this at the workshop there.
And James Gillian's going to be there, Alfred Weber, and
Andrew
Bichargo, and some other people too. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a blast. Okay, well, any comments or any closing comments both of you would like to make?
Well, if you were interested in the Mount Shasta event, it's actually a link at the on Michael's website too.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the time both of you took here to chat with me for the first hour, and I look forward to our second hour, okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Martin. It's our pleasure.
Well, thanks again, you guys. Take care, and goodbye, and I'll see you again.
Okay, bye.
All right, then. Take care. That's it for the first hour on As Above, So Below Radio. Tune in for the second hour by subscribing to holisticadvocate.com, where Michael and Laura will further impart information on how we altered the outcome to a positive timeline to help usher in open contact. The Bundy Ranch. Was this event staged as a dress rehearsal for something far more sinister? Both Michael and Laura will also share their perspective on the damaging effects of smart meters and their role as surveillance devices. Also discussed will be the common law grand jury and much more. You're listening to As Above, So Below Radio.